I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Friday, February 16th. We begin once more in Saskatchewan, where a new First Nations-led emergency alert system is now in place for the James Smith Cree Nation. It comes some 2 weeks after a coroner's inquest concluded into the 2022 mass stabbings on James Smith. An inquest that delivered 29 recommendations, the alert system among them. Rachel May has more.
On Wednesday, James Smith Cree Nation unveiled a new way to communicate emergency alerts to band members and those in the local area. A new feature on the Talking Stick app called First Alerts, which is now up and running, will allow leadership in First Nations communities across Saskatchewan to share vital information about emergency events as they unfold to members of the community, such as missing people, natural disasters, and public safety. The First Alerts app is also designed as an emergency alerts app by Apple, which means that users will receive an emergency notification to their phones, even if they're on silent or in airplane mode. Chief Robert Head of Peter Chapman Band, one of the 3 bands that makes up James Smith Cree Nation, said this tool can save lives.
That'll be a great way for us to have advanced warnings for natural disasters, for missing persons, or for any kind of public safety event that's immediately happening that needs to be broadcast to the membership.
Head was joined by staff from Tricycle Data, the developers of the Talking Stick app. Talking Stick gives First Nations members across Saskatchewan access to peer supports from First Nations people, regardless of where they are. Cecile McKay, the provincial director for the Talking Stick app, says she's glad to add this new emergency alerts feature and encourages individuals to reach out to their peer support workers during stressful times.
Just know that it's someone like you and me. We're there to help you along, guide you.
The app can now be used on any First Nation across Saskatchewan and is now available on the App Store for both Apple and Android users. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew have announced funding to improve the province's healthcare system. The feds have pledged $633 million to help with emergency wait times, long-term care for seniors, and to hire more healthcare professionals. That includes more physicians, nurses, paramedics, and home care workers. Both leaders say their governments will work with Indigenous peoples to address healthcare gaps and systemic inequalities.
There are some real challenges facing our health systems right now. It can be too hard to access a family doctor or a nurse practitioner. Emergency rooms are too often overwhelmed. People are waiting for the surgeries they need, and healthcare workers are under immense pressure, working in conditions that make it even harder to be there for their patients.
We're going to ensure that you can access health care in the north, that you can access health care on reserve, that you can access health care here in the city of Winnipeg just as readily as you can in rural Manitoba.
Still in Manitoba, where the annual Memorial March in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people happened this week. A chance to give space to families grieving lost loved ones. This year's march took on added significance in light of the recent deaths of 5 family members. Sounds of song by some of the 400 marchers who made their way through the city's downtown. A sea of red made its way to Manitoba's legislative building. It all took place just days after 5 Indigenous people, including 3 children, were found dead near the town of Carman, an hour southwest of Winnipeg. Event organizer Alea McIver says those tragic deaths had an impact on the march.
Every day should be more important, and how we can do better, right? And how we can action better and how we can really move the narrative into actioning those 231 calls to action. Therefore, what's recently transpired in Carmen, for example, really pushed us to look deeper within ourselves as a committee and how we can respond to that, because there was young lives lost.
To Quebec and a class action on behalf of day school survivors from provincially run institutions, a suit authorized by a Superior Court judge back in December. Victims allege they suffered physical, psychological, and sexual abuse at the schools at the hands of teachers, administrators, and employees. With more on their search for justice, Maricela Amador. A story some listeners may find upsetting.
We were all in a karate position, meaning they had us kneeling shoulder to shoulder. It was punishment.
Adrienne Jérôme, a former chief from Lac-Simon, was a little girl when she attended day school on the reserve. The school, still standing today, serves as a constant reminder of the abuse she and many other children in Lac-Simon endured for years.
When I was a little girl, I used to tremble. You had to be like in the army. If you weren't standing up straight, you'd get beaten.
Jerome is part of a class action that is seeking compensation for survivors who allege that abuse was rampant at day schools in Quebec. It includes victims who attended provincial, public, or religious schools between 1951 and 2014, or in an Inuit village from 1963 to 1978.
You had to say yes or no. If you said no in Anishinaabe-Moan, you'd get a beating. Just little words. Can you imagine? Nobody wanted to talk. Nobody wanted to say anything in Algonquin, and that was our only language.
Her experience echoes that of many other survivors in Lac-Simon who have now decided to tell their story.
The principal was always pulling on my ears. She even pinched us with rubber bands.
The survivors recounted that the abuse first started when they attended a school in Louiscourt, located a few kilometers away from the community.
That's where the Kitchi-Sakik children were kept for school.
The day school was then relocated to Lac-Simon. Today, it is called Amekwich School.
From the age of 8, they started doing things to us, like physical, verbal, and psychological violence, because they treated us like wild children, no brains. I'm going to tell you today what she did to me. She touched my private parts.
Papatsy, like the others, said that the abuse got so bad that many of the children would purposely act out to avoid going to school.
The principal would put me in a corner to punish me for not listening. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to know anything about school because we were subjected to things. She would put me in a corner and punish me by making me kneel with 2 rocks underneath my knees so that I'd understand in her way.
Some of the children resorted to sniffing gas in order to get through the days. The trauma affected their behavior. Jerome said that she became violent.
I had become dangerous. The girls beat me. I hit a girl in the face with a rock. I became a delinquent. We started vandalizing the school.
The survivors said that non-Indigenous children also attended the school, and they would bully and also beat the Indigenous students. The school ended up shutting down for a period of time after it was completely ransacked by some of the children. But unfortunately, following the incident, the survivors were transferred to the church's basement where the abuse continued.
The priest who made us suffer, all the caresses, or rubbing with his beard, it stayed with us.
After leaving day school, many of the survivors ended up falling into drugs and alcohol to cope with the trauma. Most refused to go back to school altogether. They never completed high school. Papatsy said that the class action is a step in the right direction.
I think it's good because it's going to bring out the pain and start the healing process for us survivors. It'll be a journey toward healing.
But it will never erase all of the suffering that went on in those schools.
The government thinks that we will forget about it because they give us money. But no, it doesn't work like that.
We were traumatized as kids. My son's generation, it's a generation that seems to be headed in the same direction. They are being traumatized, and we have to put a stop to it.
The Montreal law firm Dion Schulz is representing the survivors. In a written statement, they said, the class action has officially passed the first stage, with the possible exception of one of the school boards. It is the James Bay School Board, which is attempting to remove itself as one of the defendants in the class action. The Court of Appeal will hear the application on February 15th. This appeal may slow down proceedings for the entire class action, but will not stop it completely. Maricela Amador, APTN National News, Lac-Simon, Quebec.
A reminder, the Hope for Wellness helpline is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for those in need of counseling or crisis intervention. Call 1-855-242-3310 or connect to their online chat at hopeforwellness.ca. And that's your APTN News Brief for Friday, February 16th. I'm Rick Harp.